Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about workflows around testing for accessibility on the web specifically. I am an accessibility advocate at thoughtbot as well as developer for web and mobile web. We do Rails development, we're a consultancy, and as part of that we attend to web accessibility as part of our craft and as part of our responsibility to our clients. And I assume all of you here today are at least interested in accessibility or professionals in the space, somewhere in between. And if you are, you may be looking for new tools or new workflows to help you test for accessibility. And that's essentially what I'm talking about today. It's just like a bare bones package or process that you can use to test accessibility in your web apps. And the message here overall with accessibility testing in general is that catch accessibility issues early. It's not hard and it'll make your life easier down the line. I'm not going to go really in depth into what accessibility is or why you should test for it. I'm assuming that either you kind of have a sense of that already, or if not, you can follow up with me or Thomas or many other people here afterwards and we can sort of fill you in. But at the core, accessibility testing will improve your applications and protect you from being compromising your user experience, really is what I would say. When we talk about testing accessibility, we have to, like, what are we measuring ourselves against? Well, most commonly, we talk about, this is overview slide. We're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to talk about standards and guidelines, which I was just touching on. We're going to talk about testing tools and techniques. And we're going to talk about the future of accessibility testing as I see it. Standards and guidelines. So how do we know when our content is accessible? What are we looking for? WCAG 2.0 is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines revision 2.0 that defines pretty much the canonical standards for what web accessibility is and how to test for it. It is a vast document that has a variety of different entry points in terms of like synopses, but really you're not going to be able to just get your hands on WCAG 2.0 and walk through it and test every single guideline because it's sometimes esoteric or opaque and it's very broad and far-reaching. So part of what I want to do today is sort of try to help you distill that down and find tools that bundle together certain sets of rules that will make it easier for you. TLDR, too long, didn't read. With regards to WCAG, these are some high-level approximations of a subset of the rules that WCAG defines. So for example, labeling form elements. If you don't label your form elements, then someone using assistive technology won't be able to associate what the form is supposed to be doing. For example, a password field. If you don't have a label associated with the field, if you navigate to that field, you're not going to get any announcement from a screen reader, for example. Next up here, I have provide alternative text for non-text content. Essentially, that means, well, amongst other things, you may know it as alt attributes on images. So the idea here is if someone's visiting your site and they can't see the content as a cited individual, they need some sort of alternative text so that assistive technology can announce that to them so that they get a full experience of the content. Next, ensure color contrast meets a minimum threshold. People who experience low vision and for that matter, people outside on a mobile phone are not going to see your content if it's extremely light gray on extremely light gray. This is sort of a best practice from a user experience standpoint in general, but WCAG defines specific thresholds for contrast ratio in your applications. Next is do not use color alone as an indicator of meaning. So color blindness being the example here. If you have a series of results, let's say, in a set of test assertions, and they're passing and failing, one is green, one is red. If you just have a little dot there that says green and red, it's not very communicative to someone who's colorblind. And then finally up here, I have captioning audio content. Again, if someone can't hear, they're not going to be able to enjoy your presentation that you post online. So add captions. Those are just a few of the rules you might actually encounter in WCAG, and it's a lot to manage, honestly. So what a lot of people have done, and what I've tried to help contribute to online through open source projects, is bundling and codifying these rules into assertion libraries. Basically code that you can run on a page that will evaluate aspects of these rules and tell you if you have errors and how to fix them. Now it's not going to give you a full picture of accessibility, but those kinds of things are what computers are for: checking color contrast, checking label associations. Like, these are repetitive tasks that can be effectively codified into a library. The tools that I want to talk about today are contrast ratio, which is a color contrast ratio checker by Leah Veru. For people who came in just now, there's a link to the presentation. It's tinyurl.com/A11ywilderness. All of these links are in that. That's a link to the presentation. So anything you have there will be available now or later. Then secondly, accessibility developer tools. This is a Chrome extension that you can install through the Chrome Web Extension Store for free. And it will make assertions on things like what I talked about. I'll go into detail in just a moment. And finally, capybara-accessible. This is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I helped create at Case Commons when they were a client at Pivotal, where I used to work. And it is an automation framework for testing accessibility within a browser. So essentially, you write a script that walks through the pages, and it will run tests from accessibility developer tools on the page and give you a list of failures for every single page. Every time you click a link, every time you visit a page, automatically it will generate those failures. So contrast ratio. This does pretty much what you'd expect it to do. You enter background color on the left, text color on the right, and it gives you a value. And that value is the contrast ratio for those two colors. WCAG 2.0 specifies 4.5 to 1 minimum contrast ratio for text size that is 18 point or 14 point bold. Now, keeping in mind, point is not pixel. There's a calculation that converts points to pixels that you can do, or you can go to a site that has like a table of pixel and point values and just look it up. I mean, it's something like 14 point is about 18.7 pixels. So that's something easy enough to convert. And then if you put something in that's a lower threshold, it turns red and gives you a warning message and tells you why, or make a recommendation on what would be a better combination. Next is accessibility developer tools. This is also a project that I contribute to. It comes out of Google's Chrome team, and it is a set of assertions written in JavaScript that are encapsulated in a plugin. You install the plugin in Chrome. When you run it, we've got an animated GIF on the screen here of the Chrome extension. It pulls up the console that you would use for developer tools that is part of many developers' daily workflow, but it actually adds failures, and it inserts rules into the page. You run it, and it creates a list of failures and warnings You click on any of those failures and warnings, and it opens up the element in the inspector. So there's this seamless integration for a developer between what's failing, where it is on the page, where it is in the code, and what you can do to fix it. For example, like for color contrast, there's a color contrast assertion built into this library that will allow you to click a button and actually change the color of the text in the browser. So you can immediately get an idea of like, what would this look like if I made it a little bit darker? You know, maybe it goes a little darker in the blue direction or the purple direction, but it's a starting point. I'm gonna skip ahead here. Maybe I'll come back to this and actually open it up and demo it, but it's maybe a little confusing, I understand, but let's revisit this afterwards, and if we have time, and I'll step you through each individual feature of that. So capybara-accessible, I sort of scratched the surface on earlier. For people who are in QA or who are developers, especially if you practice test-driven development, this is kind of awesome. What it does is it integrates these rules into a capybara script. Now, capybara is a way of automating web browser interactions. What you can do is you can write a script that says click on start, and it'll click on any button on the page that's labeled start. And then you can type fill in email with some text, and it fills it in. So this is great for automating web pages. By itself, you can just make regular assertions like the page should have some content. Well, when you mix in accessibility developer tools, it actually makes assertions like the page should have enough color contrast, the page should have labels on the form elements, and then you get output like what's on the screen here. What we're seeing is we ran the command to execute this script. We've got a series of failures that gets output to the terminal, and we've got a specific error that says controls and media elements should have labels, and it failed on the following element, and then there's a selector there. So as a developer, I can run this test, or as a QA developer, can run this test and get a very specific idea of where the failure is. And even better, you get an idea of regression testing. So if someone introduces a bug later down the line, all of your work, testing it in the browser with accessibility developer tools will go down the drain if someone introduces a bug. This will guard you against that. So I'm going to pause for a second. Those are the testing tools that I'm going to cover so far. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yes, please.
I have a lot of problems with working with websites that don't use semantic elements, that use divs and watchers on those divs that are not watchers for keyboards. Is that something that gets caught in these testing tools?
Sure. The question was, when working with markup that's not semantic, that doesn't describe its purpose to a system, and that has JavaScript associated with it, okay, so the scenario being you have a div that's supposed to sort of be a button, for example, but it's not actually a button element. Can you capture that with a testing tool like accessibility developer tools or some other things I've shown? The answer is sometimes. I mean, it's actually a difficult problem because there's pretty sophisticated heuristics around trying to guess this thing. It doesn't say what it is. We're going to try to guess based on some JavaScript events that are associated with it that it's a button, and then tell you it's not, that it should be a button element. It's difficult, and it's not something that specific use case is not something that's covered by any of these libraries, but it's something that could be. I mean, it would be a lot of work. But that goes to my next set of slides, which is around like smoke testing and usability testing. Yeah. Any other questions so far? Okay, so we've covered a few testing frameworks. Let's talk about the next step. If you really want confidence in the accessibility of your content, you're going to have to put it in front of people and ask them what their experience is. Before you do that, you might want to sort of smoke test, as we might call it, in the browser. The first thing you can do is use tab navigation to ensure that you can focus all of the elements on the page with just the keyboard. Now, imagine you have a motor impairment where you can't use the mouse. You're going to be using only the keyboard to navigate the content. So if you can't, if you like open a link and it pops up a window, if you can't navigate to the close button or hit escape to close that dialog, you're screwed. And now you're in a state where you can't use the site anymore. So ensuring that you can tab navigate through all of the content will support both users with motor impairments and also people who are using screen readers to some extent. I'll talk a little bit more about screen readers in a moment, but that will cover a lot of bases. The next thing you can do is use VoiceOver or some other screen reader with your content. VoiceOver on the Mac is the built-in screen reader that you can activate by hitting Command F5. I'm going to do it right now. Let's see what it does.
VoiceOver on Chrome, Speaker Notes, Web Accessibility Wilderness Guide, Google Slides, Window, Speaker Notes, VoiceOver off.
Okay, so it's really weird to as someone who has no experience at all with VoiceOver to turn that on and try to figure out what's going on. It's overwhelming. So there's a link in the presentation that will show you how to use the, there's a demo tool basically that'll introduce you to VoiceOver. It will show you the basic commands. It goes really slowly, which is great, and helps you sort of wrap your head around how to use VoiceOver. And once you have that basic understanding, you can then open your content in Safari and sort of poke around and try to get, at least a general idea of what the experience might be like. The caveat there is that unless you're a sophisticated or even like somewhat practiced screen reader user, you're probably not going to understand what the experience is going to be like. You're not even really getting a full approximation. You're just trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's using your site and have empathy and also, troubleshoot maybe specific issues. To that point, if you enlist people who are sophisticated screen reader users, then you get a full picture. So there's one service in particular called Loop 11 that is through, I don't recall the parent service, but it's a usability testing service online that will connect you with users who have disabilities, and they'll test your site and they'll give you feedback. And so that's sort of a advanced route to really accessible content. So that's high-level usability run through. Any questions on that? Yes, please.
You mentioned VoiceOver. Does that ship with Safari for desktop, or does it ship with OS X?
It ships with OS 10. Yeah, if you're using Windows, you have a couple of options. Probably NVDA would be best because it's free and it's very good, especially with Firefox.
You can use JAWS. You just need to restart it every 40 minutes.
Yes, JAWS is, I think, still the most prevalent screen reader. Someone's going to correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, and it is $900 or something in that realm, but they have a trial version that stays open for 40 minutes and then you have to restart. But you can also use something like VMware's parallel, like Fusion or Parallel Desktop, where you can open, I think you have something later, where you can actually open Windows on your OS 10 desktop and run screen readers that way. So you don't need a Windows machine to get that experience. But the point being is, like, if you have a Mac, use a Mac. Like, my attitude towards this is by hook or by crook, right? Like, make your content accessible. If you need to use VoiceOver with Safari and that's all you can do, that's a start. And and maybe it'll push you into a direction where you can have more sophisticated practices further on, but start with what you have. Last set of slides. Software as a service. This is sort of a new space for accessibility, I think. Well, that's not entirely true. It's new to me. I've been working on a tool, and also I'm going to show you a tool by Carl Groves, who's sort of famous in the accessibility arena. The first is something I've built. It's called AccessLint, and it's a site that automatically runs accessibility developer tools, the library I showed earlier, on a URL that you give it. And it'll just go out, hit that URL on a server, and then print out all of the results to the page with all of the markup that's affected by those results. This is really early days, but I wanted to show it as sort of a demonstration of, I think, a new breed of tooling that's coming out online that is different for a couple of reasons. In this case, this is all open source. It's free, and if we ever decide to charge for it, it's going to be very inexpensive. And it's JavaScript enabled. It's kind of a sophisticated topic, but suffice to say, it is a more complete picture of accessibility when you can run testing on your page with JavaScript enabled. So again, early days. Same with Tenon, tenon.io. This is a testing tool that's built by Carl Groves and his team. That's a web-based, JavaScript-enabled, API-driven testing tool. And we're looking at some more animations on the screen of a walkthrough of Tenon, which has a URL field. You put in a URL or a list of URLs, and it prints out a report. Kind of similar to what AccessLint does. This is much more comprehensive, and it has details on what the WCAG rules are that are associated with those failures, levels of confidence, and a handful of other features that are really nice. Let's see, and it has a paid API. So that's interesting in that you could build systems on this platform that actually run through an API. So you could have a testing service that you run that is actually built on this API separately. And that's what I have today. So I welcome any questions that you have now. Thomas is going to present a little bit more on color contrast tooling. But maybe what we'll do is maybe let's hold off for questions until we've both presented. How's that sound? Good. OK. Thanks.